think I've said it before, Jared, but listen, we got into diversity efforts because we felt it was the right thing for the National Football League. And we're going to continue to those efforts because we've not only convinced ourselves, I think we've proven ourselves that it does make the NFL better. So we're not in this because it's a trend to get in it or a trend to get out of it. Our efforts are fundamental in trying to attract the best possible talent into the National Football League, both on and off the field, as I said previously. And we see that. We see how it's benefited the National Football League. And so I think we'll continue those efforts. I think it's also clearly a reflection of our fan base and our communities and our players. And I think all of it is something, people talk a lot about the Rooney Rule. I don't know if that's your follow-up question. If it is, I'll stop and let you ask it.
No, keep going.
But the Rooney Rule for us is not, there's no requirement to hire a particular individual on basis of race or gender. It's simply on the basis of looking at a canvas of candidates that reflect our communities and to look at the kind of talent that exists there, and then you make the best decision on who is hired. And so many of us, including the National Football League at our office, are doing that voluntarily at all levels because it has benefited us. And I hear that from companies on a global basis, is that that's a very strong hiring practice that we are adopting also.
Yeah, just to pivot back to the officiating and the question about the Chiefs and favoritism.
That wasn't your second question.
Yeah, okay. No, that is. But to that end, right? No, to that end, Roger, can you shed some light on the quality control measures within the officiating department, within the league, that really look at on a comprehensive basis if there is bias? Can you tell us a little bit about what happens behind the scenes to ensure
Well, I can't tell you all the things that happen behind it, but I will tell you that our officials are evaluated in several ways. It's not just the performance on the field, but it's things that go on in their own lives. And we have a very tight controls over that. We monitor that very closely in a number of ways. And as I say, these officials are outstanding people, both men and women, and they go through a lot to become officials. It's a tough job, a really hard job that is, it's half the group sees it one way and half the group sees it the other way. And they understand that coming into it. But I've never seen a more dedicated group of people than our NFL officials to getting it right, to doing the best job they possibly can. And I'm proud of the work they do.
Is there any consideration of going to whether it's a sky judge or being more transparent so the viewers at home can understand a little bit better? Because that's where a lot of the conspiracy theories come from, for people not understanding or not seeing the process.
Well, I think, as you know, every network has so-called officiating experts that have been officials on our field. And I think they've been helpful in trying to explain those rules. And I think we have been more transparent now. When we make a mistake on the field, we say it. We're not afraid to do that. But there's so many times there's confusion or they don't understand the rule. And that includes people on television too, Kurt. Don't take it personally.
Not in the studio.
And I think that's something we continue to work on, to communicate better, educate better, but also to use technology. I think, this game has gotten so much faster. You're seeing so much than you did even 6 years ago. I challenge all of you, go back and look at an NFL game from the year 2000. The quality of what you see, the cameras, the angles, the number of cameras, you see an awful lot more. So we want to use technology to supplement and to assist and support the officials in getting it right. Replay assist this year, I think, was a big step forward for us. I see us in the future adding more plays, and we'll look at that with the competition committee. I think there are areas like face mask and some of the other areas that I think we could add to that and assist the officials in what's a very fast game. They don't have the benefit of going back and looking at replays from 16 different angles and the time and then the debate. They've got to make a snap decision. And so, I'm proud of what they do, but that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to try to get better.
Hey, Roger. Ben Volen, Boston Globe. My question for the 10th year in a row is about Tom Brady. who's now the lead announcer for Fox. And will be
You're
calling.
consistent, Ben. That's
Yes.
good, though. Yeah.
I have a bit. He's also, since the beginning of the year, been approved as a minority owner of the Raiders. And he's not just an investor. Pete Carroll recently called Brady integrally involved and said this is his opportunity to put his stamp on a franchise. I'm just curious, why does the NFL allow Brady to hold these dual roles, and is there any concern that he could gain an unfair advantage for the Raiders by being a Fox broadcaster?
Well, I'm not sure how you would, Ben, on that case, but let me start with the fact that everybody in the National Football League, owner to personnel, is still subject to tampering rules and other policy. They're responsible for that conduct, and they're all held accountable for that. In the case of this actual transition, as you know, we had special rules that were designed for this, for some of the concerns that some of the ownership had on this, and to make sure, as we learn a little bit more about this, where could there possibly be any kind of conflicts? That's something that we'll obviously consider in the off season and think about that. Should that policy be adjusted? Should something be added or subtracted? But right now, that Tom has been incredibly cooperative. He calls frequently about it and says, "Am I doing okay?" And I think he's serious about making sure that he separates these two and he doesn't put the league or anyone in a position of conflict.
Hi, Roger. You touched on the over here. Hi, Roger. You touched on the Rooney Rule, but I wanted to ask, how do you assess the efficacy of the Rooney Rule in this past hiring cycle for coaches and general managers? And do you have any concerns about the validity of some of the interviews that candidates are receiving for the Rooney Rule?
Yeah, I think, again, I think anytime you go through a good process, and I think the Rooney Rule is a part of that process and an important part of that process. There's more to it. It's only one aspect of our policies. But I think going through that is obviously a very positive step. We also follow up. We follow up with the candidates. We speak to them about the sincerity and the thoroughness of an interview to make sure that we're doing that in a proper fashion. So I think all of the steps that have been made are followed up, evaluated, and feel comfortable that it's being done the right way.
Hi, Commissioner. Hi, Kurt. Record low concussions this season, 17% reduction compared to last season, continued reduction in lower extremity strains. What was your initial reaction into hearing about some of those numbers, and what more might the league consider in regard to rules, potentially new technologies to help further improve health and safety of the players moving forward?
Well, I would say a couple things. And one is I think it's reinforcement that we're doing the right things. When you look at the concussions example, I do think one of the most significant changes this year was the adoption of the players wearing the best helmets. We've invested, the various helmet manufacturers have invested using a lot of the research that we've provided. They are competing to make the best helmets. Our players are seeing that. We've worked with the Players Association to make sure they're adopted. I think we had 370 players that went into the most recent developments of helmets, and I think that's showing. And the Guardian Cap is in addition to that. For those who may not be making the adjustment to the best helmet, a lot of those players have added that to their helmet and to their protection, both in the preseason as well during the regular season. And I think all of those steps, and then obviously just trying to take the head out of the game. We've really focused that on the rules. I think it's showing that it's effective in doing that. Our competition committee uses all the data that you've heard about last week, but we use all that to make decisions on where should we focus? What are the next rules that we should focus on where we may see an increase in concussions? Kickoff might be the one that's worth taking a moment here because that got a lot of attention. And it was really the challenge between what we've been faced with as a league. How do you make the game safer and more exciting at the same time? And we brought back, I think the data is 332 additional kickoffs this year. We had 8 concussions this year. We had 8 with 332 less plays the year before in 23. So that shows you, I think, in context, that we were able to bring the concussion rate down. We were able to bring it more in line with the line of scrimmage play, and still bring 332 new plays into the game. And I think that is what we're trying to accomplish, right, is make it safer for our players, but also try to make it more exciting and take those plays. And the kickoff is an exciting play that we want to have back in the game, and I'm incredibly encouraged by the numbers.
Hey, Roger, how you doing? I'm right here. Right here. Quickly, I wanted to know, what do you think the league should do if it has a corporate sponsor that is participating potentially in any DEI rollbacks? And then secondly, if I could sandwich this in here to the end of the Rooney Rule, I did talk to a coach who said that next year and just moving forward, he's not participating in any interviews that feel like it's a Rooney Rule situation. So I wanted to know what your reaction to that was, and then also just when you consider examples like Aaron Glenn electing not to do the Patriots interview, or just even this coach saying that moving forward he's not doing it.
Well, that's not unusual. We've had coaches who've done that. They have to make their own decisions about whether they want to participate in an interview process. I encourage coaches directly, and I would say it here, I think they are benefit from every opportunity to interview for a coaching job. It gives you the experience, the opportunity to go through that, and to find a better way to present yourself in a way that can talk about why you think you can be the best head coach or the best coordinator or the best NFL position coach. That's what all of us go through in interviews, is how do you present yourself and sell yourself? And I think they should take advantage of that. But that's up to them, ultimately. I understand if they feel that it's not appropriate and they don't want it. They may not want to for a personal reason to go to a particular team. That's up to them. So I think that's just something that we're going to face, and we always have. Well, we don't make policies for our sponsors or any of the corporations or networks or partners that we deal with. We have a lot of conversations about the importance of it to us. We will obviously take everything into consideration, but I think eventually there are a lot of corporations who that have been tied to so-called changing their diversity policies and haven't really, and they've called directly about that. So there's a lot of conversations that go on about that.
Hi, Roger. In October, you said that you wouldn't be surprised if there would be an international Super Bowl one day. I guess two parts there. What makes you think that's more likely now than it was a year ago or before you said that? Two, why do you think owners would be willing to put the Super Bowl somewhere where none of them had a team?
Well, I think, Ben, when I say that, and if I didn't in this case, I say it almost every time. The reason I say that is because I do think there's a potential that someday we're going to have an international franchise. And if we do, I think it would not surprise me at all if a Super Bowl follows and is played there. We do like to have, this is a great example, being here in New Orleans. It's a great thing for the New Orleans Saints to be the host of the Super Bowl, have the world's attention. And I think the same will be true if we had an international franchise to be able to play a Super Bowl there to support that franchise.
Hi, Roger. Today, multiple outlets reported on the contents of hundreds of emails between the Saints and the local archdiocese. They show Saints leaders leveraging the team's influence in New Orleans and using their NFL.com email addresses as they help the church manage the fallout from a clergy sexual abuse crisis. Do you have any concerns with NFL team employees doing this work, at least in part through league platforms? And does the league plan on launching an investigation?
Well, a couple things. One is Mrs. Benson and the Saints are very involved in this community, and they are great corporate citizens. And so Mrs. Benson takes all these matters seriously, particularly for someone with the Catholic Church connections that she does. But I would say this is a matter of the FBI, I think local law enforcement nationally and otherwise are involved with this. Mrs. Benson first mentioned this back in 2018 in the context of this. She's made multiple comments about this, which you all have seen, her transparency of the emails that are out there. So I leave it to them, but I'm confident that they are playing nothing more than a supportive role to help me more transparent in circumstances like this.
How you doing, sir?
JP, how are you?
I'm doing well. Got a Chicago question for you. When you look at the Bears that are moving forward to build a stadium in Chicagoland, how vital is it for a state-of-the-art facility for a city that is looking not only just to bring major events, kind of like a Super Bowl hopefully one day, but also the tourism dollars that a facility like that generates?
Well, I think we're sitting in one, right? The Caesars Superdome. You know, the improvements that were made here are a large part of why we select New Orleans. We talked about that at the front. Stadiums are an important role for the NFL and for the teams, but they're also huge assets for the community because they do attract those great events. They do bring people in, and I think they're part of economic revitalization of a lot of communities. So I do think it's important. The Bears lease is up, I think, in 32 or 33. It's a long ways off. They're being, very thoughtful. They're speaking to everybody about their needs as well as community needs and where they could find a stadium that would be suitable and can have the kind of impact that you're talking about bringing big events. And so I think the process they're going through is very positive. And a lot of our teams are doing that.
Shireen Williams, NBC Sports Pro Football Talk. In Buffalo, obviously, Josh Allen and the Bills still believe that he made those first downs. How close are you to being able to use technology as opposed to human eyesight to determine those first downs? I'm sure you guys are working on that some way.
We have. We tested, I think, in the preseason this past year on being able to use that technology. It is complicated. Obviously, you have a lot of humanity that interferes potentially with some of that, at least from a camera angle standpoint. But you also have a shape of the ball that is different, and it's about where the ball is, not where the individual is necessarily. So there are a combination of factors are there, but I do think that technology will exist sometime in the future. We're continuing a lot with our partners is how to advance that as quickly as possible so we can get to that place.
Are you working behind the scenes, so to speak, like testing it out so that I'm just throwing this out here, a year from now you decide to do this, or 2 years from now, that you've kind of got some data to work on rather than just kind of guessing?
Yeah, I think it's. I think that's exactly why you tested it. It's not unusual for us to use preseason, maybe even other leagues, to be able to test technology to sort of see the accuracy of it, number one, the reliability of it, number two, because you have to be right when you do it, ultimately. And so I think technology is advancing at such a pace that we obviously incorporate that into our game, but you really need to test it, make sure your data is right, and then implement it when you think you have it right.
Hey, Roger. Randall Williams, Bloomberg News. You've previously spoken about expanding the international games to 16. Have you thought about selling a media rights package to either an incumbent partner or a prospective one? That's question one. And then question number two, Nike's new CEO, Elliott Hill, said that you were his first call. I wonder what your relationship is with Elliott and what you want out of that partnership. Thank you.
Well, I'll take it in reverse order, and I'll come back to your first question. Listen, Nike has been a long-term partner of the NFL. I think they're one of the few partners that we allow on the field, and they're authentic to our game. I think they make athletes better. Athletes rely on them tremendously. We also look at it in how they can help us with the safety issue, particularly as it relates to the surfaces that they're playing on. The shoe is critical in that. And advancing the science behind that and working with a partner is critical. And Elliott has been very, not only outspoken about it, but he's also been very cooperative about it. Our teams have already met just a few weeks ago. But I'd also say the global nature of Nike is really important to us. We're obviously global is something that we're intent on becoming a global sport, and that is something that Nike is a global brand that can help us in that area, support our efforts in that area. Going back to something that Kurt asked about with flag football, a big sponsor of getting kids active and supporting the game and getting more kids to play the game. So they're a critical partner. Elliot is fantastic. He's somebody that's been in the Nike family for decades. I think he and I started pretty close to the same time in our business, and he's got a love of that company, and the passion he's thrown behind it is amazing. So I look for great things between Nike and the NFL. Well, he asked another question, which I do want to. What was the other one?
It was about expanding the number of international games.
Yes. So we do think that 16 is something that is realistic. We're looking to try to get to 8 games this year. We may fall short of that, but we think we'll get close to that. But I see that continuing to progress and giving people a chance to really experience our game firsthand. And when I see what happens when we bring a game to a community, Brazil, the most recent, Sao Paulo, and Jeffrey was gracious enough to play in that game with the Eagles and start our season off last year. That was a great opportunity for them to get a sense of what it's like to be in our stadium during a game and to experience it. And the reaction and the spark that it creates is really is critical to our efforts. But you need to follow that up with playing the game, with media, with sponsors activity, and getting fans more access to our game. And so that's our job, is to try to bring more access on a global basis.
I think in fairness to him, too, he asked about, would you sell the package to a current partner?
Absolutely.
Or something? That was part of the question, right?
I think media arrangements are critical to that, as I just said. And I think, whether it's a strip of international games, whether that's to a current partner or a new partner, you all know that we played on Christmas Day with Netflix. That global audience averaged 30 million per game on a global basis. We think that's just a start. And we feel that was a tremendous success. I think both Netflix and the NFL feel that way. And we're looking at how we continue that, but also how we enhance that.
Thank you very much. Roger, there's no secret that the White House has gone to war against diversity. And the other thing that's not a secret, the majority of owners, NFL owners, have been supportive of the Republican Party, to say the least. What gives you confidence that none of that is going to affect all the things you're saying that the NFL believes in diversity?
Well, because, our owners participate in everything we do. Jeffrey actually is very active in this area. And, our policies have been designed to be well within the law, well within the practice. There are no quotas in our system. This is about opening that funnel and bringing the best talent into the NFL. And so we are confident with that. We've talked to the diversity committee several times since the last 6 months or so. And we're incredibly confident of that. But we also believe that we're doing the right thing for the NFL, and it's our policies are consistent with the current administration as well as the last administration.
Roger, last week the Baltimore Banner published a story that contained allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior by the kicker Justin Tucker. He has strongly denied them. As far as I know, at this moment, there have been no lawsuits or charges brought. What's the NFL's stance on what needs to happen next? What was your reaction to that story?
Surprised, but also, there's a process for that, as you say, both civil and potentially criminal. We obviously have NFL investigations for that, too. We obviously look at that where we don't want to interfere with the criminal side of that. But so we will look into those issues. They're obviously serious issues, and he's taking that seriously as well as we.
Hi, Roger. Wanted to follow up on the Rooney Rule again. You mentioned that you speak with minority candidates after they interview to make sure it's followed in proper fashion. Have you ever spoken to a candidate who had felt like it wasn't properly, their interview didn't occur in proper fashion and they felt otherwise?
Yeah, there have been candidates going back a ways where they didn't feel it was as authentic or what they thought was thorough enough. And so we go back to the clubs and we talk about that. And I think we've made changes to our policy to make sure we deal with that. Last year we put a cap in how long the interview could be because sometimes they were holding the candidates too long ultimately. So they're actually capped at, I think, at no more than 3 hours in an interview. So we look at that every year with our committee. We make modifications that we think are helpful. I think slowing down the process last year was a key issue for us because it gave teams more opportunity to be able to be thoughtful and go through an entire process without jumping to a candidate. As you remember, this is an unusual hiring process because teams are competing against one another in a very short period of time. And so that's the balance that we have to draw and make sure that the process is done in a thorough and fair way.
Thanks. Roger, another officiating question here. Has the league considered flagging for flopping? This may be a social media question, but I think we all have seen a lot of quarterbacks who maybe game or milk the system and the rules. We've seen a lot of guys who maybe are the second retaliator who then get flagged for egregious flailing of arms or, excuse me, what have you. So is there any consideration to potentially flagging for flopping as some other sports leagues have done?
Well, I can't speak to the other leagues, but I think I guess it depends a little bit on what your definition of flopping is. We have taken very strong stands on teams and players that have not necessarily what we would call the player wasn't necessarily injured on the play. They were trying to use to stop the clock. You may put that into the flopping category. The other may be just trying to draw a flag on another team. I think that has not been a significant issue for us. Competition committees talked about that in the past. They probably could talk about it in the future. Wouldn't surprise me.
Hey, Roger, I got two questions. I'm going to ask them one at a time. Just the first one, with the NBA deals, do you feel as if your NFL contracts with the networks and the other platforms are undervalued at this point? And if so, why or why not?
I always think we're undervalued. How's that? Listen, I think the NFL, you see it by the ratings. They're extraordinary. We had 58 million people watching the AFC Championship game this week ago. And you see the quality of the content and what it can do. I think we're also, obviously, as you know, with the changing media landscape, we're changing also. We still have nearly 88% of our games on either broadcast or over the air, the highest by any standard of any other league. No one comes close to that. So the most fan-friendly policies. And I think you'll continue to see that, but we'll also look at Netflix, we'll look at YouTube, we'll look at Amazon, and not just look, we'll continue to work with them to improve what we're doing with them. And Amazon, I think, had another 40% increase in audience. Their ratings are now coming very close to broadcast audiences and about to cross over. And I think they will very shortly. So when you see what we're doing with the Netflixes and the Amazon and the Peacocks of the world, I think that's going to be a very important advancement for us in the context of a media strategy.
Then with that said, how do you look at the opt-outs that you have coming up at the end of the decade? Do you feel like it's likely you'll opt out at this point?
I wouldn't say that. I would say this, and I said this to the owners when we negotiated these agreements and we went to the committee as well as to the ownership, is that I think those opt-outs are incredibly valuable for the NFL. They give us a significant opportunity to look at what the best options for the NFL are as we get to that stage, in large part because the media landscape is changing so quickly. Are there different avenues that we should approach and have different opportunities to pursue? We have that built into our media deals, and I think that'll be serve us very well.
Roger, Jonathan Alexander, Houston Chronicle. You mentioned how stadiums often bring economic development the cities. How do you wrestle with the fact that oftentimes many cities, counties, and taxpayers often have to foot part of the bill to pay for stadiums that could be financed by billionaire owners?
Well, Jonathan, we look at this as what we call public-private partnerships. I've been in this business a long time, but stadiums were something I spent an awful lot of time in the 90s and early 2000s before I became commissioner. Still spend a fair amount of time on it. And I believe in it because I see the economic impact that our teams have in a community. And when you invest in a stadium, either publicly or privately, I think the return is significant to both and to something we look to make sure that our public and private partnerships actually benefit all parties. And I think when you look back at those communities that made those investments, I think it's a positive story. I think our private investment, both as the owner of a franchise and also as the league, all 32 teams participate in the financing of a stadium. And I think that's a very positive thing for us in making sure that we find the right balance, find the right formula for each community, and making sure that we reach the right conclusions and have the best facility that will produce those results.
Hi, Roger. Lindsay Jones from The Ringer. Just a couple minutes ago, you talked about access to the game and expanding the reach to fans on as many different platforms as possible. That being said, what is your commitment to independent media that is covering the NFL, including reporters being allowed in the locker room?
Listen, we think our media policies are really important. So access for you, and you're the connection between us and the fans. You play an incredibly important role. That's why we're sitting here today. And we happen to be sitting in an NFL locker room. The reality is we do think access is important for media. There are ways to balance that, which we have tried to do over the last several decades, to also consider the player's perspective and other perspectives as far as a team may have. The players have been pretty outspoken with us. We've discussed this. Lloyd and I have discussed this. And we're going to listen, obviously, and make sure that we understand and make sure that we explore every opportunity to be able to find the right balance between those.
Ask mine at the beginning. Remember?
They're going to ask you any.
No, I've got, for me. Oh, now I get it.
As you know, Congress passed legislation to give Washington, D.C. control of the land surrounding the old RFK Stadium site, potentially making it an option for the Commanders' next stadium. Is it important for the league to have the team play in the district?
Well, I think it's important for the team to play in an area that is beneficial for the fans. It's going to be beneficial for those communities, and it's going to be beneficial to the team. I'm also a kid who grew up in Washington, D.C., going to RFK Stadium. And I remember that experience. And I see that stadium site today. I went by it when I was down in Washington in December. And frankly, you know, it's really it's disappointing. It made me sad to see that area and how the stadium looks today and how that community looks. I think a new stadium there can be a huge economic driver. I think it would be great for our nation to be able to see a new stadium there with the stadium and with the monuments and the Capitol in the background. I remember that as a kid growing up. The power of that vision and what it means to that community, I think, is a really powerful thing. So if it turns out that that is the best alternative, I think it'd be a great thing.
Roger, Kurt alluded to this at the top, but the destruction wrought by the Los Angeles wildfires almost defies description. You have schools, businesses, 150,000 people lost their homes. And these are not necessarily millionaires and billionaires. A lot of regular, everyday people lost everything. Last night, the Grammys raised $7 million for firefighters and survivors. Considering the NFL's footprint in Los Angeles with 2 teams, NFL media headquarters there, your own personal legacy in Los Angeles, What's the league's role, if there is one, in helping the rebuilding process that could take years or even decades?
Sam, I guess I'd say I think it's beyond just being corporate citizens. We obviously have 2 franchises there that play in SoFi. We've all made an important investment, and not just in dollars, but we're going to be playing our Super Bowl there in a couple of years. And I think for us, Los Angeles is we see the devastation. It's hard to understand that devastation. And I think we're going to not only be good corporate citizens to support whatever efforts are to take place in the recovery, but also to lead. Our owners were out there with over $5 million in the first 24 hours when we had to move the game to Arizona. And I think our owners step up every time. They step up to help communities recover. They step up to help communities get better. And I don't think it'll be any different with the Rams and the Chargers leading the way, and a lot of others who have a tremendous interest in Los Angeles. Our partners are a lot based out there. We have a media company based out there. We have 5 of our employees who lost their homes. And so it's impacted us personally. It's impacted us professionally. I don't know how any of us cannot be impacted by seeing that devastation. But the NFL is going to be there to support that, and it's also going to be there to use our platform to continue to bring attention to it, because that's probably the most important thing we do, is be able to give attention and focus to a community or an issue that is out there that we all need to be aware of. Our players have been leaders in that area. And we have players that have stepped up and done amazing things. And so I think you're going to continue to see that, and we'll want to be part of rebuilding LA and bringing LA back as quickly as possible.